Let us bring on the show returning guest, haven't had him on in a while, host of the Historically podcast, Citizens Media TV, and of course the Activist MMT podcast. Welcome back to the show. Not the one that hung himself with a paper t-shirt, Jeff Epstein.
Oh man, I miss hearing that. How are you? And last time I was on, it was in the middle of the pandemic and your hair was opposite. I remember you saying I was making fun of your hair by, I don't know, pictures or something. How are you?
I'm good, my friend. How you been?
I'm okay. It's a lot has changed since we last spoke.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. It's a lot has changed. So I wanted to bring you on. You reached out to me, said, Graham, I'd love to talk to you about the debt ceiling. Obviously, this is a big thing in the news. The two fantastic parties, the Republicans or Democrats, are just doing their best to service the American people in the best way that they know how.
Is that sarcasm? Am I doubting? Go ahead.
So we've got to watch this, this, whatever you want to call it, ridiculous theatrics that happen within the Congress and the Senate. But
it's kayfabe. It's kayfabe.
It's,
you know what that is?
No, what is that? That's
a wrestling.
Oh,
it's just a perpetual fake show that pretends that it's real.
Yep. And always pretending that, and it's deliberately getting everybody dragged down into the specifics of whatever dilemma of the day is, right? It's always like, well, if we just get this, then we can get that. And they're blocking this. And it's always, rather than getting people to pull back and go, the whole system's corrupt. And also you came on this show, I think for the first time, maybe 3 years ago, to discuss, to open my eyes to MMT, which has been great. There's a whole MMT playlist on YouTube, folks, if you want to check that out.
I just got another email from someone that said that they watched that first show. And like every now and then I just get these emails of, I watched your first show with Graham, and it was really cool.
It's really cool. And I appreciate that. Now, some people have said, in this last year and a half of two different presidencies, Trump and Biden, printing a lot of money for the pandemic. Some people go, well, see, this is the problem with MMT. They just want to print money. And it's like, well, that's not what MMT was ever saying, that we should just print. What MMT has been saying, to sum up, is that all of these excuses that are made about how are we going to afford Medicare for all, how can we afford, free college or whatever. This is the thing I hope people have been waking up to the last year and a half. And I've said this numerous times on my show, every time some new stimulus bill passes, when people go, how are we going to pay for Medicare for all? Oh, the same way we just paid for this $9 trillion in bailouts or whatever. We could just do that, and the never-ending war cycle. Of course, Biden is, picking up right where Trump left off. He's bombed Syria twice, Somalia. He said, I'm pulling us out of Afghanistan. The way he's done it has been a complete cluster, of course. And that watching four presidents from two political parties spend $3.5 trillion over 20 years to let the Taliban be removed and replaced with the Taliban that now has more American weapons. That doesn't show you how ridiculous everything is.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how they can just print and do whatever they want. And if they wanted to print money for good things, they could.
You actually said it really well. It's MMT is not about, they can print, there's no consequences. Let's just create as much money, and do whatever we want to do. Let's just have luxury and whatever. It is about exposing those who try and say we can't do what's desperately needed because of the debt, because of the deficit, because of the debt ceiling. It's like, the supercar can go fast. There's a supercar, and this guy's driving this supercar that just came off the lot, but he says it only can go 25 miles an hour. MMT says, I'm pretty sure that it can go faster. And so someone will come back and say, oh, well, we might as well floor it and crash into the wall because, obviously MMT says, no, it just says going too slow is dangerous. Going too fast is dangerous. Just go the speed limit. That's it.
Right.
Recognize your capabilities, recognize your limitations, and don't violate any of that stuff.
Good luck with our current banking system. I mean, then when you've got the corruption, and which we've talked about at great length, but I wanted to bring you on specifically, and I'm really glad you reached out to me to discuss to explain to everybody what's going on, what this debt ceiling means, what the way they talk about the deficit, and then there's always this like, the government's going to shut down. We just avoided another crazy shutdown, but of course we've moved the date to whatever it is now, December 13th, before we have another one of these.
It's just always around the corner. It's always around the corner for our entire life. It's always around the corner.
Yeah. So, let's get into it. Just go into the basics for everybody, and then go into, I think you wanted to describe just the basics of like personal debt versus public debt.
Yeah, I'd like to very briefly, if it's okay, I'd like to very briefly give a background for the rest of this discussion. And just to simply, most people and politicians, elected officials, pretend that, we, the United States government, national government, is borrowing so much money. We owe that money back. And how can we ever pay that back? And what they're doing is they're taking our personal experience and conflating that inappropriately with the national context. So they're they're inaccurately, they're misled, they're being deceived that personal debt is the same thing as national debt. So personal debt, you borrow from a bank, they give you that money and you are instantaneously in debt for that loan. Instantaneously in debt, scary debt. You don't pay it back, they will mess your life up. So there's and you're in debt until you totally pay that back. You're and you're not out of debt until it's completely paid back.
And so to clarify too for the audience, this is why I think because this is everybody or most people's personal experience with debt is, I have a car loan, I have a line of credit, I have a credit card. And if I miss a payment, there's late fees and the interest rate goes up, or you get 0%.
They'll come in and take my car, or
eviction, foreclosure, all that stuff.
Exactly. So there's the two core qualities of a personal loan, of a personal debt. Number one, there is a higher authority. So me and the bank, I'm the borrower, bank lends me money. There is a higher authority, the government. And number two, the lender, the bank, and the borrower, there is a massive power imbalance. The bank is way more powerful than me. I have no chance. If I don't pay back my loans, they will make my life miserable. They have the tools of the state at their disposal. Okay. So,
and the only recourse an individual has is like filing for bankruptcy, where you get the debt wiped out, but then that's on your credit report for whatever, 7 years.
7 years. And so yes. So personal debt has those two critical qualities: higher authority, and the borrower and the lender, way different, massive power imbalance. Okay. Now, national context. China, the United States so-called borrows from the United States. Its own money that only it can create, it borrows from China. The United States borrows from China. So people fear, the United States is going to go bankrupt. China might want their stuff. They're going to come, They're going to come repossess the UN or something. So the relationship, those two qualities, higher authority, China, US, there is no higher authority. There's no higher authority. There's no global government. And number two, the power imbalance between the lender and the borrower. The United States and China are essentially the same power. So if someone says China's going to come and take our stuff because we're not paying back, they're going to be met with the US military. What chance would they have? That makes no sense. This makes no sense. So the idea that national debt is in any way comparable to personal debt is just wrong. It's not just a little bit different. It is opposite world different. So I think that provides us a good background.
And it also should be noted too that the number one holder of America's debt is the Federal Reserve.
Right. So I borrow from my right pocket and I put it in my left pocket. Am I in debt? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does your right pocket have leverage over your left pocket? I mean,
Right. And it's like I borrowed from my wife and I pay her back, but we have the same bank account. So, I mean, what are we talking about here?
okay, so that's a good context for people to understand that. First of all, it's not the same debt. It's not like a person that's behind on their car payment and their car is going to get repossessed, or they're going to have to file for bankruptcy and have a bad credit report and they can't.
We don't create money. We don't create money.
We just don't pay the money. So walk us through now the specifics of what is going on with this debt ceiling, drama that gets played out every year.
Okay, so the debt ceiling actually started off, it wasn't called the debt ceiling at the time. The debt ceiling actually started off in the early 1900s, and it was a good thing. It's like kind of like, you get prescribed medicine and you really need it and it's a good thing, but then you don't get off of it when you're supposed to get off of it, and it turns into, you become addicted. It turns into something bad. So in the early 1900s, the Congress had to approve the spending of hundreds of agencies. Hundreds. And it was unwieldy. Didn't make sense for them. So to improve that process, they delegated that approval process to the Treasury. So that was the beginning of what has become the debt ceiling. That's no longer the case. Now it has, especially since the 1980s, has transformed into a scaremongering tool, basically. So it's based on the idea that there has to be a ceiling on the national debt, as if the national debt is the same kind of debt as personal debt. So that's a little bit of history. It is a law. It's the law that the national debt, the total number of bonds that anybody holds, cannot exceed X, whatever number they make up. It's the law. It's the law because they make the law, and they choose this to be a law. They choose what is law. They choose what is not law. For whatever reason, they choose this to be law. There is no financial, economic reason for this to exist. There is a political reason. It is a very easy way for them to say, oh, the debt ceiling, it's a law. These lawmakers who make the laws and can destroy the laws, they choose this to be a law, but then they turn around and they point to it and they say, oh, debt ceiling, we can't violate that. But they just made it up. So I forgot a point, but I'll leave it there for now.
Well, that, again, it's so, like, the way our government is structured is so, the reason I laugh is it's so hilarious, because it's literally just all this, it's just one, like, America is just one giant capitalist Ponzi scheme. It's just basically just, they set up all these laws and rules and money. I mean, like, even the Federal Reserve is basically just an illegal banking cartel. It's not, it has, it's not regulated by the American people or anything like that. And they get to determine.
I would say it is regulated, but Congress doesn't use any of those powers to regulate.
Okay.
So they are essentially not regulated, but that's because Congress allows it, turns the other way while they do all that stuff. We kind of talked about that last time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's now, so when we just see on the news, oh, we got the debt ceiling, and it's this looming meteor that's coming to smash us. And if we don't get it fixed, we don't agree on this. If Congress can't, the debt ceiling, how is that? Like, what is the actual reasoning behind this constant kayfabe, as you call it, kayfabe, yeah, in the wrestling world?
Okay. If you make the laws and you decide this to be the law, and every time you come up against, violating that law, the law suddenly changes. But up until that point, you spend all that time, the law, we can't violate the law. And then as soon as we're right about to get there, you change the law. I mean, that's what this is. And if you make the laws, then this really seems to me like less like a law, but from their point of view, less like a law and more like a New Year's resolution. I mean, it's essentially a New Year's resolution, right? So at the beginning of the year, I am going to keep the debt below the debt ceiling, and I'm going to exercise every single day. And, I have to exercise. No, I have to exercise. It's important. It's critical. And then I'm so tired, forget exercising. It's a New Year's resolution. That's all it is. The people who make the law To the people who make the law is self-imposed. To us, we obviously have no choice. To the people who make the law, whatever law there is a self-imposed law. So the reason that it's there is a political reason. It's political. So from a financial point of view, it's pointless. From a legal point of view, they choose to make it important because they make the laws and they choose the penalties for those laws. From a political point of view, it is to, in my opinion, this is not MMT, this is my conclusion after learning it, it is just another excuse along with inflation, inflation, the boogeyman, not real inflation, the scaremongering inflation, the debt, the deficit, the debt ceiling, all they are tools to deprive the poor, but to pretend you don't want to deprive the poor. That's what it is. That is the political reason for this. And unfortunately, most have been deceived into believing these myths as being natural scientific laws that we can do nothing about, when those who are in power use these as shields to hide the truth, which is, of course, we can provide for the poor. We just don't want to. MMT shows that we can provide what is desperately needed for the poor. Again, we drive the speed limit. Don't go above it. Just recognize that you have the ability to go faster. And in the context of the government, we have the ability to provide for the poor.
Yeah. And well, providing for the poor, there's no profit in it. I mean, that's the main reason probably why they don't want to, is there's no profit in it. Not building private prisons and jailing the poor. There's money in that,
Well, of course, it's profit for who, it's freedom for who, it's democracy for who, it's a community for who. That's everything you give to the poor. Anything you give to the poor makes them more powerful. Anything. Education, giving people education is not just about making people smarter. It's about power. Giving people healthcare is not just about making people healthier. It's about power. You make people more powerful by giving them these things, and which means that the rich who haven't gotten anything, now that gap between the rich and poor is now less. So relatively speaking, the rich are now less rich. They're less powerful.
And a healthy, educated populace is harder to control and to scare. I mean, look at how divided our country is. You can scare people.
They make you sick, and they make you sick so they can sell you the cure. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, eat all this crappy food, and we're not going to give people healthy food. We're not going to educate people on healthy food. We're not going to educate people on, we've talked about this before. Like, there's a reason why, the working class is not taught money management and and wealth creation and asset.
The government
protection.
will not teach you how to stand up against the government.
No, they won't. And in the same way, having traveled all throughout this country for 20 years and seeing I think there's a lot of parallels with food. Because I see in these areas of the country, even right in California, where there's food deserts, and you're seeing, again, you want to eat healthy organic food, you better have money, because Whole Foods ain't cheap. I mean,
Amazon Whole Foods.
Yeah, Amazon Whole Foods is not cheap. I mean, even Trader Joe's, which is a better run company in my opinion, still is not cheap. It's not, and regular, Kroger and those national chains are starting to have more organic produce in it. But again, the cost, you see it right next to each other. You see the organic head of lettuce is $4 and the regular one is $2 or whatever. And therefore Americans, we have an obesity epidemic. And I would argue that part of the reason there's this kind of feels like America is going insane in terms of all the arguing about whatever, QAnon, the vaccine, this and that, Americans, is because there's got to be people aren't eating as healthy. They're just not. And they're pumping themselves full of crap and then, come in and take all these prescription drugs, and everybody is easier to control. They're just easier to control in that sense. And you go to other countries, especially, and not that Europe is some utopia, but Europe is older. This is the thing we don't understand as Americans. Yeah. European countries have had 2-3 civil wars and revolutions. They've had several. I mean, they've had 500 years of different monarchies. They've had a totalitarian government, and now they have a representative. And they have parliamentarian. They have a socialist government, and they've gone through all that. They've had war. I mean, quite literally, World War II. They had war, awful wars on their soil, and they've had them for centuries. This is why the Europeans are a little like, we're done with the war, and everyone goes, yeah, but the tax rate is so high. Well, yeah, because they get a lot for their taxes. There's no old people in Europe working in Walmart because they don't have a pension. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I would like to see the information of taxes being high, because taxes don't pay for stuff at the federal level. I mean, there may be a reason for it, but I want to see that information. But who cares are they happy?
Yeah, their quality of life is
right. So yeah, their taxes are high. What's their salary? How much do things cost? Taxes are, you can't focus on just one side of the transaction. You have to focus on the entire picture. Are those people happy? Are people in the UK happy that they have, aside from they're trying to decay it and neoliberalize it, but they have healthcare? Are they happy that they have that? So, is taxes the most important part? Is that the only part of the picture? Yeah. I mean, basically it's just, we are made desperate, and then we're punished for acting desperately. People don't have time to look into better food options. People don't have time to, they're just spinning their wheels, and then they make bad decisions, and then we blame them for making bad decisions. There's, yeah. And
and part of it is they don't have the options or the choices, or, again, they're on a really strict budget, and it's like, you only got, $100 for groceries. I'm just picking round numbers. Well, $100 of, organic food is only going to give you whatever, let's just say 2 bags of groceries.
Not much. Yeah.
Not much. Where $100 of non, less healthy food will give you 4 bags of groceries. Well, you got to, you're married with a couple of kids. It's a no brainer which one you have to pick. I mean,
of course.
And
no choice.
That's the choice you have to do. So how does this now, Jeff, and if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Jeff Epstein of the Activist MMT podcast. We've had him on the show before. We're talking about the debt ceiling. How like, the thing I'm worried about, and I'm sure you are too, is like all this money printing that we've done in the last year and a half with COVID. We're starting to see some inflation start to happen. The cost of goods and services are just going, just even in the grocery store, you're noticing it. Gas prices have gone up. And, how do you see this? Because I watch a lot of various financial shows. Some of them, are from crypto people, but there is a lot of talk of like all this inflation is going to, all this money printing, and not for necessarily good things, just like, and while we needed, let me clarify that. We obviously needed some stimulus money. When you shut down the economy because of the pandemic and people aren't working, you had to give people some money and stuff like, but there was all this money got printed, and a lot of it, of course, went to Wall Street. The new jobs outlook, okay, unemployment's lower, but there's jobs that aren't being filled because people are like, I don't want to go back to work for crappy wages.
Right. Crappy wages. Right.
So how do you see like all of this money printing? I don't want to get too much into crystal ball stuff, but like, how do you, as somebody that follows this quite closely, how do you see where we're headed with all of this money printing and then increasing the debt ceiling, which, like you say, is just sort of a charade that they play, like, oh, like I love a New Year's resolution analogy. That's fantastic. How do you see all this playing out?
Printing money really has nothing to do with inflation. Creating money really has nothing to do with inflation, because again, that's only one part of the picture. The government creates and destroys money every second of every day. Banks create and destroy money every second of every day. What is that money being spent on? If you spend even a small amount of money on something that's inflationary, that's bad. If you spend a gigantic amount of money on something that's non-inflationary, that's good. It's not inflationary. We could spend money on giving everybody education because we have the resources to give everybody education. So if those resources exist, if we have something that we need to do, and we know that we have things that we need to do, currently education, healthcare, soon enough, mitigating the climate crisis. If we have things that need to be done, and we have the things sitting around and ready to do them, including unemployed people, then by definition, we can do it. Creating money, even if it's however much, it doesn't matter. If there are resources to be purchased, then we can purchase them safely. So the creation of money, the idea that the creation of money causes inflation inherently is wrong. It assumes that the world stops. The world stops moving. Because the creation of money is like you're filling the sink, but the sink can be drained. The people wash their hands. Things happen in addition to just that. It is overly simplistic to say that creating money causes inflation. Or do we have problems? Sure, we have problems. Yeah, I mean, we have lots of problems. But all those problems are wages are too low. People don't have jobs because, I want to stay home with my unemployment benefits. And okay. So the problem is that wages are so low that they're less than federal benefits for the desperate. That's the problem. The problem is we don't have good jobs that pay decent wages. And we allow companies to pay starvation wages. And then they turn around, we can't hire people. Of course you can't hire people. There's a McDonald's sign just a couple miles from my house that says, sign-on bonus. We'll give you $200 if you stay 60 days. We'll give you $100 if you stay 60 days. We'll give you another $200 if you stay 90 days, and you can make up to $13 an hour. Screw your bonus. Pay me more.
Right.
I mean, that's what this is. So that's an example of the problems in society that cause problems, as opposed to the government does stuff and that's problematic. I mean, that's essentially what creating money causes inflation means. The government did something, so that's bad. That's essentially what it implies. And I'm obviously you're not saying that, but that's essentially what it implies. It matters what that spending is on, who that spending is for, what the spending is not being done for, who that spending is not being done for. There's just too many factors involved. Things need to be done. And as long if we want to make a pie, we have the ingredients and the cook and the equipment to make a pie, we can make a pie. We can make another pie. We have plenty of pie ingredients. This is not a problem. So, I mean, that's kind of a roundabout way of addressing what you were saying. And actually, if we can make sure that we have some time to talk about Bitcoin before I go.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that. No, you bring up a good point. Had the stimulus money been used for, green jobs and putting people to work, making, good union wages, or forcing companies like Amazon and Walmart to pay a minimum of 15 an hour, but they should really be paying more like union wages of 20 to 25 an hour with full benefits, which they could afford to do. These big companies made out like bandits during this pandemic.
Of course.
Not just in terms of profiting, because there was a lot of sectors that actually, online sales and that stuff went up for these companies because they couldn't go to in-person stores, not to mention, other thing like travel and stuff got shut down. They made a lot of money. And also it probably should be to put up in here. Part of the problem we're also seeing, and this has to figure into inflation somewhere, I would imagine. This isn't my area of expertise, but we're seeing supply chain problems. I mean, just outside of the port of LA and Long Beach, we've got
real problems. Right. Real problems are our problems, not the fact that we're doing stuff. Because when the government does stuff, by definition, money is the instructions of telling who to do what and paying people for doing it. So saying that creating money causes inflation is essentially saying, then we really need to create less money, which by definition means the government needs to do less stuff. And that's not what we need. The poor need our government. The poor need the government. That's all they got is our government. Yes, there is a crucial difference between our leaders currently are horrible. We're on the same page with that. They're horrible. That doesn't mean that the institution, the idea of government is horrible. If someone has a hammer and all they do is hit you on the head with it, you don't outlaw hammers. You give the hammer to someone that is more competent and caring, and you start building stuff. It may be unlikely, it may be impossible, but the only chance that we have is to take over our government and start using it for better stuff. That is the only option that we have. Is it likely? Maybe not. Is it impossible? Maybe. I don't know. But it's the only chance we have because the government is the only entity that is stronger than the billionaires.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not impossible. Likely, no, because I don't think Americans are too busy fighting with each other than to realize they're in class warfare. That's what's going on. They
privilege. They're holding on to their privilege. I have my house. I have my health care. I have my, I love my politician who keeps saying that he wants health care for the poor, but I don't push him on it because if I push him on it, then I might lose my privilege. And they might tax me. And if there's a million people desperate underneath me, that I have to be taxed in order to pay for them, which is wrong, but that's what they fear. They're holding on to their privilege.
Yeah, they're definitely holding on to their privilege. And also, like you say, like in the first CARES Act, a year ago, a little over a year ago, there was trillions of dollars that were given to Wall Street, and had that money, as you say, been given directly to the people and UBI, student debt forgiveness, rent, just money flat out for rent, we wouldn't have this looming eviction crisis, this looming foreclosure crisis. We wouldn't have these things. And maybe we wouldn't be then having the inflation as you talk about, because everybody would be made whole.
A final point on about inflation, if I may. I'm sorry if you want to finish what you're saying. Okay. Inflation is a very specific thing. Most people think that it's this boogeyman. Inflation means the continuous rise in the price level. Continuous. A rise in prices one time is not inflation. A rise in prices in one sector of the economy is not inflation. The price of bread going up is not inflation, even if it continues. The price of everything, roughly speaking, everything going up and continuing to go up. But inflation means that, for example, if a company keeps raising their prices, do they really have to? Do we have the resources in order to, like if they do some service, there's no service that needs to raise their prices so much. We allow those prices in some cases, we allow those prices to continue to rise in some cases where it's not necessary to continue to go up. So this is also partially somewhat in some cases, in some important cases, that they are allowed to continue to inflate those prices in order to screw people out of money because they happen to be the only person doing it. So there's just a million things going on, and a lot. But most of our problem are real problems that you had mentioned before of supply chain issues and so on. If we address those real problems, then these inflation concerns will just be much less. Provide for people, and inflation will be much less.
Excellent conversation on the debt ceiling and inflation with Jeff Epstein of Activist MMT Podcast. Please check that out. Hey, everybody. Ron Placone and I had to cancel all of our October tour dates because of COVID, the Delta variant, and all that. But we still have shows in California. Ron and I are doing San Francisco, September 11th, Sacramento, September 12th, Burbank, September 15th, and Lee Camp and I are doing Live Government Secrets, September 18th in Los Angeles. All those tour dates are at GrahamElwood.com. All of the venues are requiring proof of vaccination. Dynasty Typewriter on the 18th is also saying you can do negative COVID tests, but check with the venues for what their policies are. I have no control over those policies. Go to GrahamElwood.com. Sorry we can't come. This sucks. We'll be back hopefully next year. But if you're in California or want to make the trip, come out to these shows. These are probably the only shows we're going to do this year. Thank you.